Hello everyone, CNT here, and it's time for my life and channel update for May 2024. So I was just reviewing all the different things that happened this month. There's definitely been a lot. Let me move this preview window up higher so my eyes, whoa. No windows, I don't want you to organize it somehow. So that way my eyes are a little bit close to the camera when I'm looking at the preview. As I'm wont to do. So it's been a very busy month. I've been streaming a lot more, as you may have noticed. Just, yeah, I don't know. I've been streaming a lot more. I've been having fun with it, and so I've been making a point of doing it. People seem to like the Friday time, so that's something I'm gonna try to aim for. We'll see. I not want to commit to something that I am not positive that I'll be able to fulfill, or that might be a little wonky. So like. I like streaming on Friday, so I'll probably aim to do that, but no guarantee on any given Friday. And maybe I'll stream other days too, like I did this past Saturday. That sounds right. That's what's in my dear patrons notes. But yeah, it's been a very busy month. A lot has happened. I got sick again. It has been a heck of a year for that. Let me tell you. I've gotten sick so many times. So if I have random coughs, that's why. Like the bulk of the disease is done at this point, and has been for a little while. But I've still got like my throat is more easily irritatable talking, and I've still got too much crud going on in there, and it's not ideal. One of the bigger things, though, like I said, I've been having fun streaming. One of the bigger things for me is I finished the article I've been working on spiritual trauma, so I'll include a link to that in the description. But I'm very happy to have that done. That has been quite a big undertaking. There's this thing that'll have, I don't know if any of you do any writing, but where I'll have written something and then I think I know where I'm trying to go with it, but that's not where I need to go with it, and then I get stuck, and then I have to like reevaluate, and I'm like, wait, no, okay, that thing does not actually belong here, and I have to delete it so I can actually proceed. But then I've spent so much time trying to figure out how to get forward from the place that's not actually the path forward. It's an annoying little problem. It's not actually a little problem; it's a big problem. It's an annoying problem. So, got through that and got that article done and published. It was really good for me to work on. It helped me a lot to work on it. So I hope that it has been helpful to people who read it, and has been of benefit to them in some way. Then let's see, it's also my birthday month, which means it's also because I started the Guild Wars 1 slow playthrough, where I was meticulously going through everything, looking at all the lore and everything. Because I started that on my birthday, it's also the anniversary of that this year. I don't know which one, third or fourth probably. It was a huge thing, huge undertaking. So, but what I ended up doing for my birthday this year is my sister got me the Ninjago City Gardens Lego set. So it was one of those big fancy Lego sets, and spent several days putting it together with her help. She sorted pieces so that way I wasn't digging around through through the pile. I mean, it comes in bags. It's not like we opened all the bags at once and dumped them out. That would have been a nightmare. But she'd open the bags and sort the pieces, and then I'd put it together. And that was a lot of fun. It has been quite some time since I got to really dig in on a Lego set, and it was a really good time, and something that I really enjoyed. It did make my thumbs and fingers really sore from pushing pieces together for like that many hours, because I spent like a huge chunk of my birthday doing that, and had some pizza, and otherwise mostly spent the day building the Lego set. And boy, I don't know, as a kid, if I had built up calluses on like my thumbs in order to be able to push pieces in. Like I have a habit with my fingernails of alternating which is shorter between in pointer finger and thumb, just so that way I would have a longer fingernail to use to pry apart Lego pieces. Like, this is a habit that persists to this day, because it turns out longer fingernails, like having a fingernail that's got a little bit of length to it, is really useful. There's a lot of times where it's useful to be able to get it underneath something, pry something, scrape at something, or whatever. It's a very useful little tool. So like it's been a very useful habit to keep up, but it's something I developed as a kid specifically to pull apart Lego pieces, and made a little bit of use of that building the set when I misplaced a few pieces here and there and realized it and had to rearrange things. But it's really cool. I'm looking over there because it's sitting over there. Found a spot where I could stick it in my room, and so I've been enjoying looking at it. It's been a reminder to me because like this is a very intricate set. There's lots and lots of little details in there, stuff that you don't even. If you look at the pictures of this Lego set, they do not do it justice. And I imagine this is true of any of these larger intricate ones, because there's just so many details and things, and I put all of those. It's like 5,000 plus pieces, and putting all of them in there, it's a big thing, right? But it's made up of a lot of smaller steps. So you're following all these steps, you're putting things together, and then you look and you're like, wow, look at this thing that I've built. And it's a really useful reminder for me because creatively, like when I'm working on a project or a game in particular is what I'm thinking of right here, is creatively, I have this tendency to get really stuck at the big picture view, or I can look at the small details. And it's very hard for me to see how those small details make the big picture, if that makes sense. And so I have a tendency to look at the big picture view and how everything's fitting together, but not really at the details that actually compose those individual swaths, as it were. And so, like the way I've described it is, I tend to lose the trees for the forest, and that's something that I struggle with creatively. And so, like looking at this reminds me of like, okay, you built this big intricate thing, but is out of a bunch of small, simple steps that came together to form smaller, small chunks, but like bigger individual pieces. So it's like, you've got this little room and this room, and they're stacked on top of each other, and then these rooms sticking together, and so it's these sections that you're building and then sticking them all together into this large thing with all of these parts, and it's wildly diverse and intricate and beautiful, and no two roofs are made the same way. And that sounds like a joke. It is not a joke. No two roofs are made the same way. It is wild, but it gives it all this amazing texture. And it's like I put that together, and this is something that I want to remember. Like I can look over there as a memorial or reminder to me of what building a game is like, in that you have all of these pieces that you're making, and you craft all of these little details, and they fit together, and in no particular detail is necessarily that complicated, but in aggregate it builds up to a big whole. And that's where you get that big whole that I look at, and then you're like, wow, where did all these details come from, and everything. And it's like, oh, you built them just a little bit at a time. And so to me, that's something that's important to look at and say, hey, I can do this with these game projects too. I need to remember how this actually comes together and looks, and to be an encouragement and a reminder of how all that fits together. So, speaking of which, I have continued work on my game, current game project, and it's been, I've had other things that I've been juggling as well, but it's been a good process of pulling things together, working on maps. I feel like, I keep being optimistic about the projects, but this one I'm optimistic about because I feel like I've been shrinking the scope. And one of the things I run into is as a problem, is that it's very easy to make it seem like the scope is smaller than it is, and then you actually start fleshing out those details, and you realize the scope is way bigger than you thought. And that's where I was running into problems with the previous thing, which we'll see if I get back to it or not. But I really liked a lot of the ideas that I have there, but the scope was quite large in terms of like figuring out all those details and realizing I need to get some more practice before I'm like able to understand how to tackle this. So the current one that I'm working on is like, okay, I'm being very intentional about reducing scope on it. And it's been like, even as I'm thinking about like, okay, what maps do I need? Like, one of the big things is I'm really constraining the scope of the world, right? Trying to make sure the world's not too big. And that's an area where I have struggled. And and I'm still working through like narrative details and things like that, but I'm trying to have it be a project that's driven by the narrative. Because to step back a little bit, I've talked about this before, but like creatively, I tend to be world building focused. The world is to me the most important character in some regards. It's not 100% accurate, but it's like it's a very significant character, and so the world building is really important to me, and how does the world fit together, and all of these different intricate pieces, like that's something that's really interesting to me. But the problem is that that's a lot, and then trying to figure out how do the characters fit into here. I think it's working out better in terms of trying to keep things small, of being like, what is the story I'm trying to tell? What sort of world do I need to tell that story in? And there's some interplay, right, back and forth of like things that I want to do and whatnot, as well as all like what do the characters, what do I want from characters and stuff. But I feel like my creative approach to it has been good for what I'm currently working on. It's interesting actually. Just was it yesterday or the day before? Probably yesterday. Yeah, it's yesterday. I was working on my game some, and I'm like, okay, because it's a little scattershot in the way that I work on it. I was thinking through, okay, for equipment, I know that I want these accessories. What accessories am I going to have? And I started off the way I typically have, by looking at the icons available to me that RPG Maker MV provides for equipment. Basically, they have different color coded icons and stuff, but I mean, you can do whatever the heck you want. But it's kind of coordinated. So there's these icons for equipment, and so I'm looking at these and being like, okay, these can maybe be whatever pieces of equipment, and I was looking at that, and as I was kind of like going, oh, I could maybe use this one and this one and this one, I stopped myself and I said, wait, this is how I get myself into trouble, because I'm going to come up with a list of all of these accessory types, and then I'm going to be, okay, what effects do I assign to them? This is not where the constraint is. I'm working backwards, right? I am more constrained on mechanical possibility than I am by what icons they've provided in RPG Maker MV. But this is what I keep doing to myself, right? Is I'm like, oh, I want to use all of the icons, and I start from the icon approach. And then what mechanics can I use to back that up? And I have to try to scrounge for figuring out how to do that, and it becomes this all mess of a thing. So I stopped myself and was like, okay, I need to actually analyze what mechanics can I do, and then I'll figure out what accessory icons to assign to those, to like mechanic sets. And that's going to work out much better based upon the constraints that I have working with the system that I'm working in. So that I'm really glad to have realized where I was getting myself into trouble there, and being able to back up and reassess and be like, hey, you need to approach it this way. So a few other things come to mind. The Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, the final story part of that dropped. Overall enjoyed it. I really appreciated the blog post actually that they did. It's basically a post-mortem, where you look back on a project, what worked, what didn't. And I appreciated what they said in that, in particular elements of like, yeah, we were trying to fit a bit too much story into the space we had for it, and that causing problems. And I appreciated the candor and honesty that I felt coming from that. So let's see what other things are in here that are worth mentioning. Been continuing to draft Thunder Junction. Still don't feel like I have a good feel for how to draft that set. So this is actually something that's really interesting to talk about. For this, Magic the Gathering Outlaws of Thunder Junction is the current standard set that we're drafting. And I've got really mixed feelings on it. And a lot of what it is the mechanical synergies in the set are really subtle. So a lot of sets, really, the mechanics are loud. They're kind of obvious. So, for example, in Murders at Karlov Manor, not Markov, Karlov. I don't know. I mean, I know where that comes from. But that set had the disguise and, to a lesser extent, cloak mechanics, where you're making a lot of tutus. So a lot of smaller creatures, and then you have a lot of things that care about those, right? So it's a very clear mechanical connection. calling out 2 power or less creatures, a mechanic that makes 2 power or less creatures. In that sort of a lot of synergistic mechanics like that, AB mechanics, where so you see AB mechanics, you see it in Guild Wars 1 as well. So in Guild Wars 1, Overcast being required for things is an example of an AB mechanic. So it's where you need this thing to pair with this thing in order to make it work. So, for example, if you want your lightning strike to deal additional damage, you need to have Overcast, so it goes twice. Or Flare gets an AoE on it, right? So that's an AB. You need Overcast to get this thing. And in Magic, you see this a ton as well. And the example of, okay, like Hazda Vigilante, I think it was the card, the 4/4 for 4 and a white that on ETB and attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control with power 2 or less. It's like, okay, this wants to work with morphs or with the disguise. I think disguise was a good rebrand of morph, but that's beside the point. Like it specifically is made to work with those, and it's because it's calling out that size. And there's like the vampire, the white-black vampire that cares about 2 power and less creatures. Like these things are all synergizing with that whole thing. And so it's an AB mechanic, right? With Thunder Junction, a lot of its stuff is way more subtle. So you have the not casting spells from your hand on your turn thing that wants you to use plot. Like it synergizes with plot, but doesn't exactly call it out. And there's lots of other ways that you can be doing stuff with your mana and not casting spells from your hand, right? So it synergizes with and this is the problem. I say problem. This is the challenge for me, is there's just lots of stuff that Magic has done for a long time that synergize with these things. So for example, if you have something that does an impulse draw effect, if it's not a spell that you're casting from your hand in order to do it, so this is where you exile cards from the top of your library. So if you have something that's like exile cards from the top of your library, you can cast them or play them or whatever until the end of your next turn. Well, in the next turn, you can be playing them from exile, not from your hand. And so that synergizes with that sort of mechanic, right? The one that keeps getting me is stuff that cares about crimes, where committing a crime is targeting your opponent or anything they control, or any of their stuff, basically. And targeting stuff is something Magic has done since it first came out, right? But suddenly we're caring about it. But that's because of that, because like my brain doesn't actively process the targeting line because it's just the effect, right? It's turning it into the full effect. It's grokking it in totality. It means that it's hard for me to be thinking actively about, I need stuff that targets my opponent's things. And this does that. So it keeps flying under my radar of things that enable crime triggers. Because I'm looking at like this 2/1 for 2 blue creature that attacks and shrinks an opposing creature's power by 3. Well, it says target creature an opponent controls, right? And suddenly, this is a really important card for enabling crimes. Excuse me. And so, like, because all of these synergies are so many of them are subtle and built off of things that Magic's done for a long time, which is good for the cards being able to integrate into Magic and integrate with other sets. But because of that, I'm having a hard time remembering to pick up the A's of my B's, the A's to go with my B's, as it were, right? So it's like, oh, I pick up this card that rewards you for, that has a crime trigger, right? It rewards you for targeting your opponent's stuff, but I'm not thinking about needing to pick up the cards that target my opponent's stuff. And maybe those cards are maybe look a little underwhelming, but they gain a lot more value because of the synergy. So it's a very odd sort of challenge for me of like recognizing, oh, I need this to be able to enable that, but my brain just glosses over to this part. Speaking of Magic sets, Modern Horizons 3 is looking so sweet, and I wish that the price point on it was lower, because it looks so sweet, and I'm a huge fan of Time Spiral. It came out like the year before I started playing, and I learned to play by watching people play Magic in my college's cafeteria over the course of like a school year, and I picked up the rules that way, and saw cards from over the history of Magic from that. Excuse me. So Time Spiral was like a crash course in Magic mechanics and Magic flavor and stuff that just left it. I really appreciated it. I really enjoyed it, which is not the new typical thing a new player says, but Time Spiral Block has a huge soft spot in my heart, and Modern Horizons 3 like is doing that same sort of thing, and I really like it, but I don't like have the budget to just play with it a bunch. It looks like it's going to be a sweet draft environment, but we're maybe going to do like one. I'm talking too much here. But like, because people don't want to shell out however much it's going to cost to draft that thing, right? Sorry to anyone who was upset by the drinking noise. And so it's just this very frustrating thing where I would like to be able to play a lot of the set because it seems super sweet, but I'm not going to be able to because the price point's too high, and that's disappointing. Maybe I should pause the recording and get this coughing out. Speaking of things I'm looking forward to, really hyped for the Elden Ring DLC that's coming out next month. So I'm looking forward to reporting on that next month. But otherwise, okay, we're just gonna keep randomly coughing here. I don't have much more to say. So it feels like it's been an overall pretty good month. So yeah. Boy. Okay. Well, I apologize to everyone's ears for coughing in them. I would edit them out, but that's more work than I want to put into editing stuff. I don't care for editing video at all. So yeah, it's been overall a pretty good month. Definitely had its ups and downs. But excited about the Lego set. And glad to have that article done. And been enjoying streaming. So until next time, everyone, take care. May you stay healthier than I have been, and may I catch up with you. Farewell.